This 911 Strong podcast is brought to you by our partners at the Police Credit Union of California.
As a financial institution founded by law enforcement for law enforcement and their families over 65 years ago, they have the experience and understanding to help you with all your financial needs,
including exclusive products designed specifically for law enforcement professionals. To become a member today, visit thepolicecu.org. That's the police, the letter C, and the letter U.org.
Or call 800-222-1391 and tell them you heard about them from the 911 Strong podcast. Hey friends, welcome to the next episode of the 911 Strong podcast. I am Aram, Choe, and with me as always is Dispatcher Kristen.
Hey.
Hey, we got such a good response from a post series I did on my 911 Strong page. I started I started reaching into my handbook of, I guess, my bag of experience and started writing what was on my mind, and people really resonated with them. Mm-hmm. So this series of podcasts are going to be dedicated to that. And we're going to start with the very first one I wrote called How to Be a Respected Leader. So we'll dive into that next when we come back on the 911 Strong podcast.
Station to all units.
Prepare to copy.
You're listening to the 911 Strong podcast.
Don't act like I never told you.
With Aram and Kristen, bringing you stimulating discussion.
No, I like the sound of that.
An entertaining conversation.
And now, here's Kristen and Aram.
Hey friends, welcome back to this episode of the 911 Strong podcast, where we're going to begin our series, basically diving in from our experience. Both Kristen and I have over 2 decades of law enforcement experience. I'm on the sworn side and Kristen on the civilian side as a dispatcher. Together, we've come up with some stuff that we put out on the 911 Strong page that really resonated with people. Either they were new and this was eye-opening for them, or they were experienced and they said they agreed because these were their thoughts completely. I really haven't had anybody challenge me on my thoughts on these, but we wanted to start this series on how to be a respected leader because it might help those seeking to enter a career in law enforcement. Definitely will help you in your leadership abilities, and maybe help you reflect on some of your leadership abilities if you're in that position and you're not doing so hot. Maybe this will give you some incentive to listen. And for those of you testing for sergeant or lieutenant, these would be some great talking points to bring up in your exams. So, the next few podcasts that we put out that are going to talk about various subjects, these will all be actually good for your career development and talking points for your orals. But this one I posted a while back. This was on March 2nd. And it was the first one I posted. But it says how to be a respected leader. The first thing I posted was always be under control. Never let them see you lose your cool. Most people crack under pressure, but when they see you maintain your composure, they'll assume you've been there before, you know what you're doing, and are going to handle it. You can't control everything, so don't try. So I pulled this one from my experience bag because I keep seeing. We'll go with sergeants. We see field sergeants that go out there and they just lose it. They lose their ish. I'm like, calm down. You can't control. These are fluid situations. You're not going to solve it. Number one, you're never going to come up with an answer, a good answer. Number one, when you're full of anxiety or you lose it. You got to be calm. So when you go out to a critical incident, they're going to look for you to come up with the answers. You're going to have your handling officer handle the situation. You're also going to have your dispatcher rely on you, the handling officer, to relay information. But you also have to be, as a field supervisor, you have to be out there to fill in the gaps where your officer may be missing some things, right? So for me, I've never been, my first, I was a corporal, I think, when I was put in charge of a fluid situation. And I remember kind of like, oh, shoot, everybody's listening. Dispatch is listening. The watch commander is listening. Detectives are listening. Yeah. This is my audition for sergeant, and I better do I was so preoccupied with that in my head. I wasn't focused on the job, and I messed some things up. So someone pulled me aside and said, dude, don't worry about what anybody else thinks of you. Get the job done. And so that's been my mentality. You need to calm down, be under control the situation as best as you can, and don't try to control the things you can't control. Right.
Yeah.
That's why they call them fluid situations. You got to go with it.
Yeah. We don't have that precious time that the people after the incident have to sit and, evaluate every single decision you made. And also most of those people weren't there in that moment either. So it's not a fair judgment call. You just have to, like you said, run, not care what the other ones are thinking outside of the actual situation, and just go with what you can do best from your experience and your knowledge. And yeah, I lost my train of thought there. But
Squirrel.
I know I got a squirrel moment. Sorry.
Well, that's what does happen though. It's you got to be focused, number one, and part of being focused is you have to calm down. You got to be in control, and I can't emphasize that enough, because people, when you tell them to be in control, that's everything. That's your emotion, that's your physical attitude, and that's how you address people. So if I come to a sergeant, I'm looking for direction, and the sergeant spazzes out on me, I know I've just lost all my confidence in that sergeant, because I know that sergeant's not in control. Talking and responding in control gives your troops the reassurance that you know what's going to happen, even if you don't. Fake it till you make it. And sometimes you just need to buy time. And I've done that. I've been guilty of that before. I'd be like, okay, hey, I need you to respond to this this section and make sure that containment's shored up. And I know that just bought me 2 minutes for him to come back and make sure that the containment was shored up, and I'll have something ready for him. I used to want to be the first person to show up to critical incidents, right? But as a sergeant, I'm like, no, I need to be the last one to show up. I need to make sure my guys are there. They're set up. I know what they're doing. And as I'm taking my time going over there, I go over my head the policy, the procedures that I need to know that are in place. When I get there, park my car, walk casually to the handling officer, I can say, what do you got? Handling officer tells me what he's got. I already anticipated what he might say, and I'll tell him. And that's what happens. That's a luxury of driving to a scene slow, right? If it's an active shooter or something like that, obviously you don't need a lot of thinking, just get there and do your job. But if it's one of those barricaded suspect situations, take your time getting there. Right. Think about it. And
they're not going anywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No. So
yep. It only takes a few seconds just to take a deep breath and reset.
That's good advice for dispatchers too. I mean, I know your dispatchers on the radio, when they're on the radio and it's a critical incident, you got the pressure's on you as well.
Yeah, it is. And it could be a lot. And I've just learned over the years to do breathing. And just if it's getting to that point where I'm getting really frustrated or the anxiety is setting in, I just tell myself, breathe. That's it. Just breathe. And I take a deep breath, and that's it. And it resets everything. So
you had told me about box breathing once. So I carried a box in my car just for situations like that, and it did nothing for me. Breathing in a box just made it taste funny.
Depends on what box you're using, I guess. But no, it's just, I mean, if you have time to do that, which obviously if depending on what situation it is, you're not going to have all the time to always do it. But box breathing, there's different forms of it, or they can call it tactical breathing, so it doesn't sound as woo woo for the guys. But you kind of just breathe in for like, I don't know, you could breathe in for anywhere from 4 to 10 seconds in, and deep breath. And then when you breathe out, you breathe out just as slow. But I was always told to pretend that you have a candle right in front of you and you're breathing out, but gentle enough that you don't extinguish the flame.
Okay, let me try that real quick.
You're taking your time. Yeah, no, that flame went out.
Oh, dang it. Okay.
But anyhow, it's just it's to slow your heart rate down.
Yeah.
And that's, when our adrenaline, spikes and our heart is pumping and everything else. And it just brings back your heart rate all the way down, and then you can concentrate and you're not so much always in that tunnel vision.
That's something I think as you mentioned that, I think I did involuntarily. I didn't know that was a thing, but before I walked out of the car, I would take a deep breath. And sometimes I do that when I get home after a long day of work. I'll sit in the driveway and I'll take a deep breath and just get ready to take on whatever, your kid said that. And That wasn't an actual representation of my wife, just
I
somebody
wasn't
else's
going to
wife.
say anything, but
It might have been somebody else's wife. All right, moving on. Number 2, do what you say you will. If you say you're going to do something, follow through. People remembered fulfilled and failed promises. Your troops are paying attention.
that's a good one.
Yeah, they really are. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember sitting in briefing rooms and the sergeant says something like, at the beginning of a shift deployment, for instance, like, all right, these are my expectations for the next 6 months. I'm going to be really diligent at your paperwork. I'm going to reject them to you if they're not good. I'm going to show up to your scenes and blah, blah, blah. And then, maybe for the first couple of weeks, they might do that because they're, still kind of motivated.
Yeah.
But as the 6 months go on, it's a long deployment. They kind of like, I can't believe that report got approved, or, oh, I'm glad the sergeant didn't show up on this call.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of develops, I don't want to say laziness, but opportunities for laziness, right? If you happen to have a team where guys are going to take advantage of sergeants not being there, not supervising, then the guys are going to do things they shouldn't do. It just happens because it's like, I can talk to you this way. Sure. Guys talk to citizens differently when their supervisors are there as opposed to when nobody else is there.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I mean, it might have changed a little bit because of the cameras, but for the most part, yeah, I mean, it also creates lack of trust and lack of accountability. And, like you said, it lets them push the envelope because they're like, oh, they always say that at the beginning of briefing or the beginning of a shift, and they never follow through. Don't even worry about it.
Right. And I'm not telling sergeants to be micromanagers. Absolutely not.
No. But just whatever it is. I mean, if you're going to say you're going to have your guys' back, well, then maybe when an opposing sergeant comes at you with the decision that you were okay with, or that you were okay that your team did, then you need to back them.
Yeah.
You shouldn't talk crap about your guys after you okayed it just so that you're okay with that other sergeant.
Yeah.
I think that's more along those lines. Like, if you're going to say you have your team's back, then have their back.
Yeah.
And if you made the decision in front of your team, or if somebody starts criticizing your guys in front of you, then you should stick up and be like, no, this is my team. I said I was okay with X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
So that way they know, like, hey, my sergeant has my back.
Yeah. You need to own your team.
Yeah.
You're only as good as your weakest link on the team. So you need to own anything that happens to your team, take blame for that, because it's your fault if you're not on top of it. If you're not aware of something going on, that's your fault.
It's your circus and they're your monkeys.
I wouldn't say that. No.
No, but it's just like those are your people. Yeah. I mean, I'm like making a joke out of it, but it's like, you're the babysitter and those are their kids. So you better know what they're doing and why they're doing it, and be okay with however it is. And if you're not okay with whatever it is, then you should handle it and not pass it off to the next team because you're like, oh, our shift's up in a month, so I'm not going to deal with this headache.
When I was a new officer, I hated it when sergeants would show up to my calls and they'd come out and they'd just stand there and they'd critique me at the end. I wouldn't have done that way. Well, you're not handling it. So don't tell me what you wouldn't have done. You're not handling it while you're sitting in your office watching TV. And so that used to piss me off. So, and then, a couple of years later, I had another sergeant show up to my calls, and he would show up and didn't say a thing and would drive away. And after a few minutes, be like, you good? And walked away. And would drive off to the next thing. And I was kind of appreciative of that. And so I go, hey, what's the deal? You show up and you leave, and you're bored, or you just want to get out of the office, or what's the deal? No, I'm in charge of writing your evaluations, and how am I supposed to write the category of how you perform in the field if I don't actually witness it? Mm-hmm. Plus, I'm there as your back. If you need something, I'm there. If you don't, I'm gone. I'm not there to be overbearing. And I appreciated that so much. It changed my perspective of sergeants from showing up to your calls, not always necessarily micromanaging you. They're out there to be a resource available and to observe, because that's their job.
Yeah.
How are you going to have a sergeant talk you up if they've never seen you in the field?
Right. No, and I agree with it now, but taking it a different direction, I guess. But you only know that because you asked that particular sergeant.
Yeah.
So imagine somebody else who wouldn't have asked, and the perception was, oh, they're checking up on me, or they are micromanaging. So how much to eliminate either one, it would have been nice if maybe at the beginning of, like you said, the beginning of your shift for that particular team, like, hey, I'm going to be showing up and this is why. And it makes complete sense. And I agree with why they're doing it. But then that way everybody knows and everybody's on the same page and they don't think they're there out to get them or micromanage or
lay it out at the beginning, give your expectations like, hey, I'm not a micromanager, but here I am. This is why. These are my reasons why. And it's a good lesson for those officers to be good followers. Not, you got to let your sergeants lead. Your sergeant's his or her success is going to be based on the amount of followership he gets. Right. If the sergeant gets his or her team to buy off on him or her being a leader, then that's going to lead to the success of the sergeant. So the team needs to buy off on these concepts, which leads me to my next point. The next one is be a good follower. Being a good leader also means you know what it takes to be a good follower. Showing your troops examples of what it's like to be a good follower will resonate with your troops. So, sergeants have supervisors too, right? They have to answer to a manager, a lieutenant usually. And what I used to hate seeing was other sergeants talking crap about what their lieutenant, just so they can seem cool in front of their guys.
Right. During briefings, right?
Yeah. And that's not being cool in front of your guys. That's teaching your people to be insubordinate. That's teaching because your guys, you might think that your guys all like you. I guarantee you there's one or two that don't. And you just give them an excuse. Well, you treat your lieutenant that way. And
not only that, but then they see how you are with your lieutenant when you're not in your briefing mode or whatever to, be friends or try to look cool with everybody.
Yeah.
So you might be like talking a bunch of crap there, but then when they see you with the lieutenant and they see you sucking up or talking crap about briefing, and they know what kind of person you are as well. And that's just showing them you're not a good follower and not a respected leader or how somebody should be leading.
I think you lose your credibility. I mean, when you decide to make that jump to be a sergeant, you're not one of the guys anymore. You can be one of the guys in terms of having their back, work in the trenches with them. But as far as I'm concerned, when I was a line level guy, the sergeant was on a different level. I wasn't going to jaw jack with the sergeant like I did with the young guys, other guys. And maybe if I was more of a seasoned officer, like a 20-year vet, I would have that relationship with the sergeant, but I was a kid. Yeah. And as I matured and became a corporal, I had that relationship because being a corporal was kind of the in-between, right? You're the buffer between the line guys and the sergeant. So that was even harder role to fill, really, because having to be one of the guys, but at the same time, having to be in situations where you got to keep the guys accountable. Yeah. So being a good follower also means, and being a good leader also means being a good follower. I mean, you've got to set the tone, be the example, and accountability goes both ways. It's not just keeping your guys accountable. It's also being accountable to your guys. If you're going to say you're going to do something, you better do it. If you're going to say you're going to back up your guys, you better do it and be willing to take your lumps along the way too.
Yeah. And admit your faults too. You can't expect, we're all human, and as a sergeant and even a new sergeant or even a seasoned sergeant, you're all going to make mistakes and you're all still learning because like we all know, law enforcement isn't black and white. There's different shades of gray throughout the whole career. And, the laws change and everything else. So everybody's going to make their mistakes. It's just owning up to it. And if you expect your guys to admit to their mistakes, then you have to admit to it too. It's just a growing process. And if you're humble and you let your walls down, then your guys are going to be more open to hearing your criticism of their mistakes or choices as well.
Right. And that's being authentic too. You can't be this perfect guy. Nobody's perfect. So it sends a genuine sense of authenticity when you tell your guys, hey, I messed up. And I used to do that when we debriefed after a critical incident, like the next day at briefing, I'll think about what happened on the way home and I'll tell them. And maybe they didn't even realize it because they just are not at that level yet where they're seeing at a broader scope. But for me, I remember coming in the next day and I'd be like, hey guys, I just want to apologize. I should have handled things this way. And they'd be looking at me like totally confused. Like, no, I thought it was handled well. But, we're looking at things from like a 30,000 foot perspective as a supervisor. I'm like, no, after talking to dispatchers and stuff, the communication should have been better. We should have had an interior containment as well as an exterior containment. And these are things they don't think about, but as you verbalize it and talk about it, now it's like a growing opportunity for all of us. They're like, oh, okay. Well, now, so we're all growing, and you're right. It's a continual growth. You don't become a sergeant all of a sudden stop learning, right? You're always learning.
Yeah.
Speaking of stopping, this is one of my pet peeves. You ever heard the phrase sergeant's belly or sergeant's gut? I hate that. It's
No.
like, you never? Okay. Well, it's like the joke is when you get your third stripe, you get a couple notches on your belt too, because you got to expand your belt line.
Oh. I just kind of thought that was more of a DB thing than a surgeon thing.
Detectives too, yeah. I mean, it goes along the same way because detectives are sedentary. They're sitting behind a desk all day.
Kind
And
of,
so
yeah. It makes
kind
for
of
a
the same
long
thing
day,
for this.
doesn't it?
It does. And kind of the same thing for a sergeant too, right?
Yeah.
So the next point, point number 4, is be healthy, fit in mind and body. People size each other up. It's human nature. Work out regularly. You'll be doing something that a majority of your peers don't do. Live your life unsullied. Have a healthy relationship with your spouse and children. So it's actually in our core values to have an unsullied life. What that means really is if you're at home and how do I say this gently? Well, every agency has this guy, the guy that's married, has kids, but will start showing photos to his buddies of other girls that he banged the night before. Or, hey, I'm banging this chick, or I'm talking to this chick. And they think that their status is elevated because everybody likes them and they think that makes them a leader. No, not really.
Yeah.
Because they're like, if I used to think when guys told me that, I'd be like, dude, you're willing to do this with your own personal family. You're willing to cheat on your family. What are you willing to do to me who's not even family? I'm just your coworker.
Yeah.
What are you willing to do to the average citizen who's not even your coworker? So, if you're willing to, the shock value always was shocking because it's like, man, you ever hear that analogy? Like guys that are messy at work, you hear people say, boy, I wonder what his house looks like. Because if they're
All the
messy at
time.
work,
Yeah.
right? If they're messy at work, they got to be messy at home. Well, that's the same thing. If you're messing around at work, messing around at home, then you're messing around at work. And sergeants pay attention. Sergeants remember the guys that fool around and mess around. It's like, hey, if that's your work quality at home, your work quality at work is something I need to pay attention to. So if you're in that leadership capacity and you're the leader, you need to be a role model. You cannot be that guy that gets kicks out of showing your troops, hey, well, I'm still one of the young guys. I look at this girl I'm dating. She's half my age.
Yep. I don't know why some of them brag about it. And even so with some of those guys would brag with the dispatchers about stuff like that. And I'm like, you're talking to a bunch of women. What part of that do you think is noble that we would have respect for you, that you would be doing this? And then within a week, you'd come back and talk about your wife and how you had family time and all this stuff. Like, you're not going to be a respected leader back there. Let me tell you
you're
that.
not fooling anybody.
If your family can't trust you, who's supposed to be the closest thing that you have and treasure the most, why in the world would I trust you?
All right.
I'm not confiding in you about anything, especially family. And you're not going to lecture me about anything, especially family and how the family unit should run when that's what you're doing openly.
Right. Don't give me leadership advice from your high platform of leader, just because you have the title. That title carries a lot of weight. You got to live it. You can't just. So, and then on top of carrying a lot of weight, on top of that, the other point I was making with that post was a lot of people feel that once you become a sergeant, you don't have to be as physically fit because the guys do all the dirty work. It's like, no, you're an example to your guys. You're at that spot where the guys look up to and say, hey, they promoted this guy because he's supposed to be the example. He's supposed to be what I'm supposed to be. So sergeant, I'm so tired of seeing fat sergeants. I see these sergeants go out there and they're like overweight, and it's not like they were overweight their entire careers. They were in shape before and they let it themselves go. I get sergeants get a lot of stress and cortisol builds up, but what's the best way to combat cortisol? Exercise, de-stress.
Exercise. And there's a bunch of, I'll have to look it up, but there's a bunch of tests that they could get done beforehand to see how your heart's really doing. And especially because heart disease is like one of the top killers of cops anyways, because of all the additional stress and everything else. And it's completely, well, not completely preventable, but there's a high percentage that it's preventable on your own before you have a heart attack if you actually seek it out, So, and not only that, but if you want to build up camaraderie too, if you're in the gym, your guys are going to be in the gym too. And so you're going to have more of an open
Yeah.
conversation, in the gym than you would actually have like in uniform too. So it
Right.
builds a different type of bond also if you do it that way. But I mean, if you have overweight sergeants or anybody above you trying to talk to you about your health, you're not going to take it seriously.
Yeah.
You're just not. It is what it is. And that's just how we are as people. So
Do as I say, not as I do.
yeah, you can't talk to people. You can't tell people to be healthy when they see you like ordering like a giant wet burrito and a Diet Coke.
Yeah.
That's not balance.
So that reminds me, what you just said reminds me of when I was getting hired with the sheriff's department. I had the sheriff's department had a really archaic height weight scale. And if you know me, I'm not a slight person. I am a thick person. I've been thick my entire life. And even at my leanest, like, we're talking 10, 11% body fat, I'm still a thick guy. I'm just built that way. My bones are dense. My shoulders are wide, big legs. So at my height, I was 5'8". When I was trying to get hired at the sheriff's department, I needed to be like 157 pounds. I was at 180 pounds, and that was considered obese.
Yeah.
If you know me now, I'm pretty lean right now. I'm 190 pounds.
Yeah. Those scales are so false.
Yeah.
They're
so for me to be
completely
10 pounds lighter at 180, I was super lean. And my background investigator, her name was Deputy Mountain. She said, anyway, so I lost the weight. I called her like a month later, and I only needed to lose I was 180 and I needed to get down to 157. So how many pounds is that? 22 pounds?
Sounds right.
Yeah.
I suck at math.
23 pounds. But at my age, I was 22 years old. I could jog and drop,
it's
not
easy
eat
then.
carbs. Yeah. I dropped it fast, and it wasn't the healthiest, right? I wasn't paying attention to my macronutrients or anything like that. I was probably eating muscle. But I remember I ran in the morning, lifted weights in the afternoon, and ran again at night just to make sure I maximize my calorie deficit. Well, I call her a month later. I'm like, hey, I cut the weight, because she wasn't going to put me through the academy. I cut the weight, and she's all, no, you didn't. I'm like, I did. So you're ready to take a physical right now, and you'll be on the scale at 157. I'm like, I'm at 155 right now. So yeah, I'll be fine. Wrestlers do it all the time. High school wrestlers do it, and to make weight. And she's like, well, I'm a bodybuilder, and I know you didn't do it healthy. And I was like, wait a minute, you're a bodybuilder? You were Large Marge. I gotta be careful in case she's listening. She's got to be retired by now. But she was Large Marge. She was not in shape by any means.
Yeah.
And for her to give me workout diet advice, I was like, I dismissed it. I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah.
And I'm a young, hungry guy who's trying to get a job. So if you tell me to lose the weight, I'm going to do it. And I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was a stupid advice, because when I went to get my physical, the doctor was like, oh yeah, no, for people that are over the height weight scale, we would do a body fat caliper test. And I would have been fine. She was dumb.
Can you imagine how many people they cut because of that?
Yeah. Well,
that's
she wasn't
really sad.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay. The next, create solutions. Don't be part of the problem by saying, well, I would do this instead, or if it were me. Be a part of the solution. Take time to recognize issues or acknowledge issues that are presented to you and do something about it. If your tire's flat and you add a spare tire, because that's how you get moved. Oh, if your tire's flat, you add the spare tire because that's how you get moving, right? So yeah, I hate that. People that nobody likes the guy that's like, oh yeah, I wouldn't do that, or that's a really bad idea. Oh no, well, okay, fine. If you wouldn't do that, what would you do? Well, I don't know, because I really don't have the answer.
Yeah.
That it's so frustrating. It's, if you're going to criticize somebody, you shouldn't criticize.
That drives me absolutely nuts.
Be constructive. Give good advice. Actually, I just sat on an oral panel last week while you were gone. I was at a neighboring agency, and they were testing for corporals. And I don't have to be careful. I know he listens, because I'll tell you why, because he messaged me after the orals.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So these are all strangers to me. I've never met any of them before, but I knew, because of who I am on social media, that I might have some of these young guys follow me, because the younger officers tend to be on social media.
Yeah.
They said, we asked him a question about leadership, and it was on an oral panel. And the question that he the response he said was something that talked about the different styles. And one of them was, he said, aerocratic, democratic, and laissez-faire. Well, it's not aerocratic, it's autocratic. And the three of us sitting on the panel knew that, right? It's very basic leadership stuff. Autocratic means self, like I'm a dictator. It's me, it's my way or the highway. Democratic is just like a democracy, right? You're going to ask everybody and you're going to come up with a consensus. And so at the end of that question, we just kind of glossed it over. We knew what he meant.
Yeah.
Well, the sergeant next to me said, "I'll go back to that first question. What were the three types again?" And he made him repeat it again. And he said, just maybe it was a doubt. Maybe he said it wrong. And he repeated aerocratic again. So at the end of all that, when he said his closing statement, I said, "Hey, before we go, you're a sharp guy." He did really well. You're a sharp guy. And I knew in my head he was going to go on to do more orals because he's going to promote and do really well. And I didn't want him to say that to anybody again.
Yeah.
So I'm like, "Hey, it's not aerocratic. Just wanted to let you know, I'd feel really bad if you walked out of this room and I never corrected you and you did that again and you got dinged on points, because you didn't get dinged on me. I knew what you were saying, but it's autocratic." And I explained to him why it was autocratic. And I also said, and the leadership style that you described was actually none of those things. What you actually are is a situational leader, meaning you adopt your leadership style based on the situation. And he shook my hand and he walked out. And I come home after a long day of doing orals and I go on my messages, my DMs, and one of them's from him. And he said he wanted to thank me for teaching him that, because he'd been saying that all along and nobody corrected him.
Yeah.
And that one of the first things he did when he walked out was Google situational leadership. And he said, "I absolutely am a situational leader." So he thanked me for taking the time to tell him that, because he knew I was a complete stranger. I didn't have to tell him that. And I could have just walked out. But it led to a really good conversation I had with him. And, what we did was create a solution, right? I could have just ignored it and said, "Hey, you didn't do good." I could have scored him really low. "You didn't do good."
Yeah.
Well, what good is that going to do anybody? It's not going to do his agency any good.
Yeah.
It would have been better to create a solution and tell him, correct it, and say, "Hey, this is what actually happened."
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think they should get feedback like that, because as supervisors anyways, you should be helping the next bout of people come up. Like, obviously they're putting in time and effort to sit there. I mean, who knows how many hours they put in before, but they're there because they want to promote. And if you don't want crappy leaders, then you need to help them in any way you can and offer them some solutions. And if they take it or not, that's fine. But that's what you're there for as a leader, to promote other leaders and help guide them, because when you're gone, they're going to be the ones leading it. And what do you want to leave behind,
Make it a learning opportunity and develop your people.
Yes, exactly.
Speaking of crappy situations, the next topic is don't give a crap.
I excel at that one.
Yeah, all of us. Chances are, if you hear people talking crap, others have heard it too. In some cases before you. When you don't care or react to it, people realize they have zero control over your emotions, and that scares them because they reflect on their own insecurities. Don't give the haters a platform. So as you ascend throughout your career, as you become a sergeant, let's just say you compete for sergeant, just like these corporals, right? It's going to happen with these corporals. There was 10 of them competing for 2 spots.
Yeah.
And inevitably, only 2 out of the 10 are going to make it. And you might have some of the remaining 8 that didn't make it. You might have some of them be really supportive. "Hey, good job. You really deserve it. You studied well, you prepped well." But you're going to inevitably have 1 or 2 guys that are going to say, "Well, that person kissed butt," or "That person didn't deserve it." I mean, right?
Yep.
You see that?
Oh yeah. It's like a lottery. Everybody starts betting, not fully betting, but like guessing who the next one's going to be. And then, you're going to have some people like, "Oh, well, I think this pick should have been better," or whatnot. And you can't make everybody happy.
Yeah.
But I think what really stands out is those people who didn't get picked, how they behave after the fact.
Yes.
Because there's some that are kicking and screaming for years after, and then there's some that have really taken the time to develop themselves and get immersed in whatever special details or assignments, or go above and beyond because they really do want it, and they're trying to learn from the last interview and make themselves better the next time that opportunity presents itself.
People pay attention of how you act when you don't make it. When you don't get the spot, people watch. because they want to see that you have a positive attitude for the next time. And it may be, you may not have gotten the first 2 spots, but it may be a situation where, hey, all of a sudden a spot opens up, and who are they going to pick? You might be neck and neck with another guy, but you were the one that was talking crap. No, I'm not going to pick you.
Yeah.
People pay attention.
Yeah.
And so when I tested for sergeant, I didn't make it till my 3rd try. The first 2 tries, I reached out to people and asked them how they thought I could do better. And I used that advice constructively, and I built upon that. So the 3rd time I took it, I was like, golden, right? I capitalized on my mistakes. I wasn't perfect. The first time, I thought I can rest on my own experience and laurels and just go out and wing it. And I was sadly mistaken. And that first time, unfortunately, was with your dad. Your dad was a chief, and he liked me a lot. He was the one that promoted me to corporal prematurely. A lot of people thought prematurely because I was young, or not young, but I didn't have a lot of time on the job. I guess young. And he was chief when that sergeant's exam came around. He really, really liked me. And he told me afterwards when I didn't pass, he's like, man, Aram, you really missed an opportunity because you would have been high on my list. And that was my fault. I didn't know. And I thought I've got enough experience to wing this test. Well, I was sadly mistaken. So the second time I took the test, I passed it, but I suffered in the oral panel. I thought, I speak really well. I have the gift of gab. Everybody loves me. I was sadly mistaken. Not everybody loves Aram. No, it was, there's a lot of technical questions. You can get away with some questions, like, why do you want to be a police officer? Yeah, you have a standard answer. But technical questions like, what do you do in this situation? It's like, what is the Peace Officers Bill of Rights? Like,
the laws and policies and all
you
of
need
that.
to study. You need to study. Yeah. So the 3rd time around, I took the mistakes I made from the first 2 and combined them together, and I knocked it out of the park. And then when I made it that time, I made it with a complete stranger, this new chief that came in from outside our agency who had no prior experience. So I really had to impress upon him to give him the confidence of choosing a sergeant.
Yeah.
And
it worked out.
So far, we'll say it's been 5 years. I've been a sergeant for 5 years. That's crazy. Since January 2017. I am an old guy. All right. The last one, be fair. Our familiarity, friendships, and intimacy vary between subordinates. Don't let that influence your decisions when it comes to the distribution of benefits and accountability. Everybody knows that Danny and I have a very good relationship. He's one of my best friends. And I think a lot of people would think, especially since we work the same unit, that I'm going to give him favorability, right? Special treatment. And that's far from the truth. And sometimes I have to apologize to Danny after work. I'm like, hey, I'm sorry if it appeared I was too hard on you, but I got to treat you like everybody else, especially in the presence of everybody else.
Yeah.
And he totally understands, because that's how he would treat me if the roles were reversed.
Yeah.
But at work, it's just, I have a different attitude with my friends at work. I'm not friendly when I'm in work mode, and I want to get the job done. When we're off duty, let's crack open a beer. Let's have a good time. But at work, I'm very, what's the word I'm looking for? Task oriented.
Yeah.
And I have my tasks laid out in front of me at the beginning of the day, and I want to get them done so I can leave on time. And get it done. So when something obstructs that, I get so frustrated with that. And so now I have to alter my plans, and that includes altering the people I had set for those plans. And I got to bring people in. So,
but I think when you are work friends too, if you truly are, you're not going to put whoever may be superior to you or in leadership rank or whatever in those awkward situations either, and expect that your friendship is going to get you out of things. Or in my case, expect that my dad was going to get me out of things. And for those people listening, if they would love to debate me on that, I would go toe to toe with them. But, he never made a decision concerning me. He would walk out and let them do what they wanted to do. And, he didn't help me. And for those people thinking that he did not help me one bit. I fought every step of the way for these last 22 years to be where I'm at and to keep my job.
Yeah.
Or
and for anybody that knows your dad, they really knows your dad, they would know he's got integrity and wouldn't do that.
Yes. And, even with Danny, even with certain things like or even my supervisors, I'm really good friends with one of my supervisors. And sometimes people would try to pit us against each other because they knew we were friends.
Mhm.
So if there was something that I needed to be talked about, like early on in my career, they would have her talk to me. And they thought that she wouldn't do her job or that I would get upset at her. And I'm like, no, you're doing your job and I'm going to take it because I made an error here or whatever else. Like it has nothing to do with friendship at that point. It's your job. We're
Yeah.
we're dispatchers. You're my supervisor and I'm your like employee or whatever. And it is what it is. It's not about the friendship kind of thing. So
Right.
anyhow, yeah.
If you're a good supervisor, regardless of your personal relationship with someone, if you're fair, if you approach everything fair, you're going to get a favorable result. Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Especially if you use it constructively. I've never in all the situations where I've had to keep someone accountable or discipline somebody, even if it was a write-up or put someone in an IA, it was never malicious. It was never like, oh, I'm doing this to screw you. I'm like, no, I have to do this. You put me in a position where I have to do this. So when I sit them down, I tell them, hey, this is what's coming down. And I'm going to tell you why it's coming down.
Yeah.
Not because I don't appreciate your hard work or effort, but this is the policy and you did not abide by the policy. And it would put me in a situation where now my supervisor would have to write me up if I didn't keep you accountable because now I'm in violation of policy. This, by me doing this is going to mitigate a whole host of problems that may come down the line. And that's usually received very well because you're framing it around being constructive and it's doing it for them. Yeah. And for anybody that's listening out there that has a lot of okay, I shouldn't say I'm excluded from this, but I've really never had a problem with keeping people accountable because I never had a malicious intent in my heart. And I think people that are afraid, they're like, oh, I'm afraid to write this guy up, or I'm afraid he's not going to like me. Well, I don't care. Don't. If the person doesn't like you because you have to do your job over something that they made a mistake on, then the issue is with them. It's not an issue with you. Right.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, I don't know what it is with wanting to be liked so much as a supervisor. Like you're a supervisor first, your friendships will come after. If you're fair and you're open and honest and accountable and authentic, people are going to gravitate to you.
Yeah.
If you're ruling with an iron fist and you're micromanaging and you're a hypocrite, nobody's going to like you. It doesn't matter if you write them up or not. Like it's who you are as a person. Like, go ahead and write me up if you're my friend, because I did X, Y, and Z. I'm going to understand that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
If you made a mistake, own it. Don't make it difficult. Don't blame the sergeant for writing you up when you made a mistake. Own it.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyways,
that's with being honest.
Yeah. Being honest, being fair. Well, anyways, this is just the first of a series of advice, experience advice from our experience that we're going to do. So we hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed it, drop us a line, leave it in the comments, leave us a comment. We'll post it. Leave us a review. Don't forget to smash that 5-star button and subscribe to us so that you are alerted anytime a new episode comes out. And we really rely on those subscriptions. They're free. They don't cost anything. You already pay for your iPhone. So, or Google phone or whatever you have, Android. Podcasts are just part of the phone. It's like having a calculator on your phone. And, people listen to us on their way to work or home from work, and they really tell us that they get a kick out of listening to us. They like to laugh with us. We need to bring some humor back into this thing.
That was the episode before this one.
Yeah. So go back and also listen back to the past episodes. This is episode, I don't know, we're in the 60s now. So
this will be, I think, 62.
Okay. Yeah. So there's 61 other podcasts for you to listen to. You can actually, it's hilarious. I always tell people not to listen to our first episode because we were podcast rookies and our mics were all wrong and our editing was wrong. And
we're a bit raggedy.
Yeah. I think we really started entering into a recognizable format right around episode 20. And that's when things started steamrolling and doing really good. So anyways, for those of you guys that have been with us since day one, thank you. If this is your first time listening to us, thank you too. We'd appreciate you telling your friends about us, and can't wait for you to listen to our next podcast. Yeah.
Talk to you guys later.
All right. We'll catch you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.